can we just go back just
Sure.
a bit? Codependency. So first of all, this is all laid out in your latest book, Too Much. Can you give us the
Yes.
subtitle real quick? Subtitle.
Sure. It's a guide to breaking the cycle, a guide to breaking the cycle of high functioning codependency.
Okay, so HFCs is is your acronym for high
Yeah.
functioning codependency. Can you
Yeah.
even just break that down just
Sure.
for people like me? I haven't been to a whole lot of therapy in my life. I've dove deep into the self-help world, personal growth. Wayne Dyer was my first love. And Tony Robbins, like back in that era, me and my dad
Yeah.
really bonded over that. But like codependency, just as is, what break that down for us in a way that we can relate to it and maybe
Mhm.
see ourselves in it as well.
So this is you being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the circumstances, the situations, the finances, the careers of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace.
Beautifully
So
said.
thank you, because it's precise. And I make the distinction about your own internal peace because we're all lovers and friends and sisters and mothers and daughters and citizens. Obviously, we want our people, to get what they want, to be happy in life. So, of course, we're invested. But when you're an HFC, you're overly invested and you feel responsible for. So when we think about it at its core, any kind of codependency, regular garden variety or high functioning, the foundation of it is a covert or overt desire or attempt to control other people's outcomes.
And can you be that way, say, in your partnered relationship, but not with your parents or not with your friends? Because that's how I'm seeing like patterns even within myself, like, oh, I might be a little bit of that with this person, but not in the
Yep.
rest of my life.
You can. You actually can. And then for some people, it's with everyone. And with some people, they're just not. But I
Right.
do think that I have some clients who certain relationships really kick up their codependency
Mhm.
in a different way than others. And a lot of times it's what I teach you in the book. It's about repeating relationship realities.
Mm.
So a lot of
More
times
about that.
we'll be doing something that's familiar,
Right.
right? We recognize something. So if, let's just say in your family of origin, the adults, if you had a traditional family system, um, not traditional anymore, but what used to be considered traditional,
Right.
um, and let's just say if I'm thinking about my own family, I grew up, my father had all the power because he made all the money. My
Right.
mother had to drop out of college. She got pregnant with my oldest sister. And it was at a time when there was no other choice but to have that baby.
Hmm.
I don't know if she would have if there had been another choice. It was
Right.
1958 though. So I'm glad she did because I like my sister. But
Right.
um, what I saw was this imbalance in power, and that
Mhm.
my father would come home late from work and ask my mother to make him a sandwich or food, and she would make it and bring it to him sitting in his chair. Like,
Yep.
so for me, if I have found myself in a way subjugating myself to another person in a romantic relationship, and if I was like, wow, how am I in a relationship like this again? I
Mhm.
came up with these three questions that you could ask yourself, and we could put them in the show notes too. But
Mhm.
and this is also in the book. But if you're wondering, I wonder if I'm repeating something from the past that's unresolved, because that's what we do. This is part of the process. Freud called it repetition compulsion, where it might sound counterintuitive, but we repeat dramatic or traumatic
Mhm.
experiences in our lives.
Mhm.
And I always see it as like the little kid in us, like seeking a do-over, right?
Mhm.
Like this time I'm going to be good enough. And this, even though this partner reminds me of my dismissive father, I'm going to make them pay attention to me, or I'm going to be pretty enough or smart enough, or whatever it is that
Yep.
you're thinking about. So, how can we make this distinction? You can ask these three questions. Very simple. Who does this person remind me of?
Mm.
Second one is, where have I felt like this before? And the third one is, how is this behavioral dynamic? So let's say the example I gave, the behavioral dynamic would be me sort of walking on eggshells and catering to or pandering to the partner. So again, that's a form of management,
Mhm.
right? Because that's what I saw. was this is how you manage the man in your life,
Right.
not how you relate to them with an open heart, but how you manage, right? They think they're in charge, but really you're in charge and
Mhm.
you're kind of managing them.
Mm,
Anyway, if I'd asked those questions in early relationships in my life, it would have been revealed
yeah.
that I was repeating this pattern that I had seen with my parents. So, you guys, if you're watching or listening to this, those three questions, I call them the three cues for clarity. You
Mm,
can use them in sort of in any relationship, because here's the thing, it's not just romantic relationships where we repeat things.
hmm
It can be friendships, it can be work relationships. If you constantly find yourself with like an abusive boss and you had
hmm
an abusive parent, and you go, who does this remind me of? Because here's the thing, the reason why it matters, right? Because then people go, okay, well, maybe I discover that my abusive boss is, I'm repeating something with my abusive parent. Now, what do I do?
Right.
Why it matters is that when we have unresolved injuries in the basement of our mind, right, unconscious and in our physiological self, we have to talk them out or act them out. Like these are your two choices, right?
Right.
They don't just resolve themselves. They really don't. Right?
Mm,
Time doesn't heal all wounds. Like we need to get this shit up and out. And
yeah.
so
Up and out.
up and out,
Up and out.
up the bit. Yep. And picture me with a little, I've got a little miner's light on my head. I'm holding your hand down in the
Yep.
basement. Don't be scared. Because whatever you're going to find, it's already there. Right. And all we want to do is make sure that the basement doesn't stink and that that smell isn't ruining the rest of our lives because
All those dead
the,
bodies down there.
yes, or just dead mice or whatever the hell it is. Who knows what's down there? But we got to figure out what it is. So
I love.
if you go, okay, so I am repeating this, that means now let's go back to the original injury.
Mm,
What happened between you and that parent? How did you feel about seeing your parents interact that way? What was your interaction with that parent? I give an example actually in Boundary Boss, I think is where I wrote it, but it was an experience I had in an internship that I had when I was in grad school. And I had this guy who was a very famous he was an addiction specialist, especially when Coke was really popular. This was the 90s. And
hmm
he wrote a book called When Willpower Isn't Enough, about cocaine addiction, whatever.
mm,
Anyway, his name was Dr. Washington. And for whatever reason, I hated his guts. So,
yeah.
and I felt like he was judgmental and scary and terrible and cold and awful. And I was complaining about him in therapy. And my therapist, that was like 3 weeks in a row, we're talking
Yeah.
about this guy who I've interacted with very little,
Yeah.
very little. And I don't see anything. Keep in mind, I'm in grad school, so I'm already in my early 30s. This isn't like, I had this all figured out in my 20s. I didn't. So she's like, could you describe him again? And I was like, well, he's tall. He's actually great looking. He has dimples, deep voice, kind of Brooks Brothers suit wearing, martini drinking,
Yeah.
weekend golfing, like that type of guy.
Yeah.
And she's like, Tara, who else would you describe exactly like that? And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I'm having a transference
Right.
to my boss as my father. And she
Mm,
said, and Tara, do you know why it matters? You turn into your 10-year-old self when you're interacting with him, because he would be in a meeting, I wouldn't even talk. If I saw him
wow.
coming down the hallway, I would literally jump into the bathroom to avoid him. And she goes, do you understand why this is not good for you?
Mm,
How do you want a job at this place after you graduate? I go, yeah. She's like, right. Well, if you never talk in front of this guy, he's never going to know how smart you are, how
right.
capable you are. Like you being your 10-year-old self with your potential boss is definitely not optimal. And I was like, oh my God. So I share that story because I feel like it really illustrates the concept so well and that it can happen to anybody. Because I'd had tons of therapy at that point.